Thank you for staying with us. We begin with the reassignment of portfolios to some of the ministers designated by President Bola Tinubu. According to the statement, Abubakar Momo was redeployed from the Federal Ministry of Youth to the Ministry of Niger Delta Development, while Adeboye Oyetola was redeployed as the Minister of Marine and Blue Economy. Senator Henike Lokbobiri was assigned the portfolio of Minister of State Oil Petroleum Resources, while Beribe was named the Minister of State Gas Petroleum Resources. I have joining me to discuss this Olufemi Lawson, Executive Director, Center for Public Accountability, who is in the studio with me, and as well Adams Abono, a political analyst, is joining me from Abuja via Zoom. Let me begin with you, Mr. Olufemi. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Jacinta.
You know very well that the last-minute reshuffling of this minister's portfolio raised a lot of questions. But do you think there's these factors that must have influenced this decision by the president? And how do you think this will impact the respective ministers?
Well, thank you. Beyond the fact that it is within the discretion of the president, the prerogative of the president, to appoint, deploy or redeploy ministers, what the president did with that decision, I think, is very much in line, especially when you look at, the antecedent of some of those people whose portfolios were reshuffled. I want to take, for instance, the person of Mr. Boyega Oyetola. For people who are familiar with him, he's an administrator with a proven track record and a very prudent manager of resources for those who have interacted with him closely. And I can tell you that he's one right person that would effectively manage the Ministry of Marine and Blue Economy, considering the strategic importance of that ministry to Nigeria's drive towards economic revitalization. And also look at the deployment of Honorable Lubumi Tujojo to the Ministry of Interior. The Ministry of Interior, for a lot of people who don't know, is also a very strategic ministry, has a lot to do with our national security institutions, has a lot to do with our internal affairs as a country. So you need a minister who can be up and doing. You need a young, vibrant person who can not only supervise the prestataries under it, but who can also effectively engage issues that have to do with the internal affairs of the country. And also about the redeployment of Mr. Abubakar Momo, you could understand that from the point this announcement was made initially, there were a lot of criticism about the fact that it would have required a more younger person to man the Ministry of Youth Affairs. And I think that must have warranted the president's decision. I haven't listened to the criticisms generated aftermath of his appointment into the Ministry of Youth Affairs, even before they were sworn in, to redeploy him to the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs. And the Ministry of Niger Delta Affairs is also a strategic ministry. It's an intervention ministry. And you need somebody who also have the kind of maturity and experience of somebody like Honorable Momo to man that ministry. So far, so good. The president's decision in regard to the redeployment of these few ministers, I think, was very strategic and well thought out.
All right, Mr. Adams, I don't know if you've joined us. Good evening, Mr. Adams. All right, okay. I'm told we don't have Mr. Adams yet. Let's also talk about some of these ministers. We've heard them started speaking about their target and what to achieve, and people like Better Do add Wike. I want you to help rate how their kick-off approach, how would you rate their kick-off approach so far? And that of Wike already is generated a lot of controversy and all of that. What can you say?
A lot of these people are coming into office with a lot of zeal. Some of them have the passion, haven't known their antecedent. But I think what is required presently will be more than the initial demonstration of zeal, like we've seen in the last couple of days that they were officially inaugurated as ministers, because this is not a very usual time for us as a country. It's an unusual time. So it will require a lot of sensitive calculations, and carefulness before you approach issues that are confronting Nigeria today. President Tinubu has inherited a very, very, severely injured country in so many strata, and it will require more than, the zeal to come and bulldoze, your way in the office or demonstrate the fact that you have the energy, either because you are young or because you are experienced coming from previous position of public service, to the extent that you have to sit. I understand, and I think the president must sit seriously at a retreat with his minister to actually let them work in line with his agenda. You see, we must avoid a situation whereby Minister A is driving his own mission and Minister B is also driving his own mission, so that we don't end up having contradictions and, a lot of confusion in the administration. So all these ministers must surrender their zeal first and work in line with the aspiration and the agenda of the president. Because no matter how poorly performed or how well performed a minister end up doing, it is going to be to the credit of the administration of President Bola Tinubu. So it must go beyond the zeal being demonstrated by these ministers to the point that they must work in line with the aspiration of Mr. President, in line with the agenda of the president, and that is where those zeal and eagerness should go into, not the personal preferences or their personal wishes, as we are beginning to see in some cases. Before you make promises, before you push out agenda, before you begin to make, statement like it must conform with what the president wants to do, coming into office. It must not be because of how it is done where you are coming from or how it is burning in you. Otherwise, there'll be a lot of confusion at the end of the day, and it may eventually affect negatively the dream of the president, in office.
I kind of agree with you with the idea of the initial gra-gra, like
Yeah,
some Nigerians will call it. But let's look at the idea of monitoring these ministers, aside the idea of KPI that some of the analysts have suggested. Do you in any way see the president reshuffling of his cabinet when he says any form of non-performance and all of that, not to repeat what must have happened in the previous administration, and what would be a reasonable time to assess their performance?
Well, like I said, it's an unusual time. The president, the current administration, did not inherit a so healthy country. So I personally am not currently disposed to the idea of setting 100 days, 200 days target to achieve anything concrete as it is, if we're going to be realistic. That nonetheless, we have from day one began to monitor the performances of the administration, and we will continue to do that as Nigerians on a daily basis. But the only assurance some of us have is that President Tinubu will not be a holidaying president, a president who may even be in the country and will not know what the ministers are doing, like we have had in this country in the past. It's not going to be a minister, a president who will appoint a minister who will openly come and admit later that he never knew the dictates of of his job, while in office. So I am very sure that won't be the case. That nonetheless, you should expect that this kind of president is a president that can reshuffle his cabinet at any given time, considering the fact and the zeal that the administration is bringing on board to transform the current situation. So we may not have a scenario where somebody will be minister in Abuja for 8 years and there'll be no street light this time around. I sincerely hope that will not be. Otherwise, there will be no difference. But I'm very confident there'll be difference with the character of the president and those who have formed the core, of the administration as it is.